Car is off of the dollies. Rolled it back enough that I can get the hoist back in there to pull the engine off of the stand. First thing I'm going to do, though, while I've got the space, is to remove this core support and front grille assembly, front grille surround off of the nose of the chassis. So I kind of struggled with this stack up from before. I'm going to attempt to keep it this way, so you can see it's got the washer, the weird washer. It's got a donut that goes against the top of the, and then underneath there's a donut, another washer, and then the bolt, or I'm sorry, the nut is on the underside of the chassis, probably with a washer. So I've got a tow strap here wrapped a few times underneath the intake manifold. The beauty of the Pontiac with the intake manifold separate from the valley pan. Wrapped a few times, knotted up well. We'll take some weight off it and see how it does before we remove it from the stand. Alright, hanging safely. One of the things that's a little bit of a bummer is that the way this chain comes out, it won't hang straight. I mean, it's because of the straps, it's not that big a deal to turn in a line like that. Get it in line. Anyway, just a little annoyance. Time to lower it so that I can install, or remove that, and then lower it so that I can install the transmission. Flex plate is on. There is a dot right there that lines up with a hole in the end of the crankshaft, and I'm assuming that is to keep balance. I don't know if these were balanced. Anyway, out, so it's facing out. Time to find the torque for those bolts. Alright, manual says 85 to 100. I put 90 on the wrench and snugged them all down to 90 foot-pounds. So that means that we're ready to roll the transmission over there and mate it up. Alright, I slid the transmission off of the dolly and onto the transmission cart. Gives me a little bit flexibility of raising and lowering, and also transmission slides on the metal of the cradle of the transmission. So it got decent height set now, and I've partially engaged the pins coming out of the back of the bell housing, and that one is almost fully engaged. So now I'm going to start a longer bolt and start to pull the top in, and that should have the pins seat all the way, and then we'll get all the bolts run in. Okay, the 4 shorter bolts are on top. 2 longer ones are down in the lower slots because it's a through hole in the bell housing. 40 foot-pounds is the torque for those, so that's what I'm doing it to. So, got a decision to make here. How much do I bolt onto the engine while it's on the hoist? I mean, it's easy call to do the distributor because it's right there. Now that, I have to check the timing mark. I think I left it at top dead center so that number 1 will point to number 1. The other thing, should I put the starter on? Not such a big deal when it's in the car, but you are laying on your back underneath, whereas this I would just be sitting next to it, so that's probably an easy call. Another item is the torque converter bolts, which I feel like I should do while it's sitting there. And then I can just go ahead and put the torque converter cover on. Again, so I don't have to lay under the car to do that. So I'll gather that stuff up and get going on it. Start with the torque converter bolts. All right, answer my question. That red mark is right on the line. It's at the pointer. So that would be number 1 at top dead center. And I'm going to have to rotate the engine to get to the 3rd torque converter bolt. So I have to make sure I just come back to that position there. Or I could just put the distributor in now and not worry about it. Well, on second thought, given the size of that distributor cap and the body of the distributor, with the engine leaning like that, if it's there, chances are good I'm going to run it into the firewall, and that would not be good. So we will back with plan A, which was just move it back to the mark as soon as I've got the torque converter bolts put in. Well, we were going so good, and then we weren't. So I tightened the 2 torque converter bolts that I could get to, and then started to crank the engine so I could get to the 3rd. And if I go clockwise, looking at the front of the engine, I get just about maybe 5 or 10 degrees, and the engine stops. It hits a kind of a clank sound, so there's, yeah, don't know what that would be. And if I go the other way, I can get about 60 to 70 degrees, and I come up against the same clank. I guess I'll start by checking, I don't know what it could be. I'll start by checking the valves, making sure the valves are opening and closing. I don't have a valve that's stuck. I don't know. Well, unfortunately, I don't get enough rotation of the engine to see if all of the lifters are moving. It's not enough to get some of them to come off of the followers to come off of the base circle. So off will come the transmission, back up onto the engine stand. This will go. I'll tip it over and pull the oil pan off and see if that reveals something. Well, this is not what I wanted to film. The engine disassembled back on the stand. But here we are. So I'm going to put the breaker bar on the end and see if I can determine where the stoppage is in here. Very frustrating. Well, I don't know if it's good news or bad news. Okay, we'll go with good news. It turns fine. There's no stop. So, must be something that I took off, obviously. So that would just be the windage pan, the oil pump, and the oil pan. What the heck? I mean, if this had gotten pushed in, then maybe this ran into that. I don't know. And I guess I've got to blame the dipstick tube that got rotated and turned underneath the windage tray and got in the way, because everything is now buttoned back up and I've turned it and there's nothing blocking it anymore. So onward and oh, I do have to tighten the screws on that engine mount, and then it's onward and forward. We did make progress. Yes, even though we spent quite a bit of time putting it together, taking apart, then putting back together. We are now all 3 bolts in the torque converter on and torqued, and that is one more than the furthest we got before we went backwards a few hours ago. So we'll call it the day's a win. So the question is, do I stick it in the car and then jack the car up? Do I jack the car up first, make it higher, so that when I do stab it in there, it gives me access underneath? I am thinking, let's see how high this will go, and that will tell me. I ended up jacking the car up, putting it on big jack stands, and I was able to get the hoist to lift the power pack up pretty high. So that made it much easier when we rolled it into place, and we were able to get underneath the car and deal with the transmission cross member. So that's definitely the way to do it. So there it is. Drivetrain back in the car. The exhaust pipes are connected. Transmission member, transmission cross member is in. I'm going to make sure that I can do the shifting. I may have to drop the transmission cross member because I'm not sure which way the shift linkage went. But this went back in pretty easily. I had help with Peter all evening, so that was huge. So yeah, everything slid back in like it was supposed to. Pretty happy about that. I did notice while I was under there that I got suspension bolts that are loose that I need to hit with a wrench. So certainly easy to install everything that I need to get to in here now before I put the fenders back on, the radiator brace.